Okay.
Shall we?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, you're enjoying yourselves. That's good. Yes. I feel like having an ice cream too now. Okay. So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Welcome to IELTS class.
Okay.
The writing part of IELTS is the most challenging of all four. How many of you agree?
Yes. Me.
Yes, most of you do. Yes. As a matter of fact, this is where most students lose their points. They may score high on other parts of the test, but they lose the most points for their writing, which brings their total score significantly lower than they could have otherwise. So, this afternoon, what we're going to do is, hopefully we'll have enough time to go over both parts of IELTS writing, writing 1 and writing 2. More specifically, I want to go over some of the most dangerous mistakes that students make and how to avoid them, and also give you some tips and technical details that you should keep in mind in order to maximize your score. So, if you're not getting a 7 for your IELTS writing, I guarantee you that you're making at least one, most probably more than one, of these 7 mistakes. So, let's begin. Mistake number 1, unreliable sources. IELTS is one of the most popular English tests. So there is so much information about the exam and about the best ways to prepare for exam. And a lot of times the sources contradict each other. So it's not really even the student's fault. However, what you should do is make sure that your sources of information are reliable. And what I mean by that is, the best thing to do is to use such authorities as British Council, IDP, IELTS.org, and whoever is endorsed or associated with those authorities. Now, let's continue. Number 2. We're talking about the first part of writing. And one of the biggest mistakes is having no clear overview. The overview is the first impression that the examiner gets by looking at your work, at your writing. What you need to keep in mind when it comes to a clear overview. Number 1, you want to include the key features only in your overview. Number 2, you must paraphrase the topic of the graph, whatever you're describing, diagram, chart, table, graph, whatever you happen to have. Why do you need to paraphrase? Well, unless you paraphrase, you risk losing points. If you just rewrite the task exactly the way it is written on your paper, the examiner may take off some points for the word count. They might not count the words that you are using. They might say, hey, you took it from our text, these are not your words. And as you may remember from previous trainings, the word count is very important. Number 1 is how many words? 150, exactly. So, if you get a few words deducted from that, you may end up having less than 150. And if that happens, you will lose points for your task area of your evaluation. We don't want that to happen. So remember to paraphrase in your overview. Let's move on. Inaccurate summary. Usually what they ask you in the writing part 1 is to summarize, report, maybe compare. What else? Analyze, explain. These are the instructions that you get. So you want to only include relevant information. If you just describing the graph or whatever kind of picture you happen to have completely, you will end up having maybe 500 or 600 words. That's not our goal. We want to have between 160 to 175 in this range. That would be the best. That would be optimal. Not too much, not too little. Find your golden middle and make sure your summary is accurate by only including relevant and really most important pieces of information. Grammar. The importance of grammar is very difficult to overestimate. It is so important for all 4 parts of IELTS. And even outside of IELTS, I mean, grammar and vocabulary are 2 pillars of any language. So they are extremely important. When it comes to writing part 1, we are usually asked to describe data and or trends of that data. And to do that, we use specific grammar structures, which we teach you on special trainings. And you want to make sure you use them properly in order not to lose any points for grammar. Remember, grammar gives you 25% of your mark. So keep that in mind. Vocabulary. Another 25% of your mark comes from the words that you use. And one of the reasons that students lose points is the mistake with what is called word formation. What is word formation? Basically, it means the way you form the word. English is a kind of language where most words have more than one meaning, depending on the context that they are used in. So, we provide you all kinds of lists. If you go to my website, IELTSBNW.com, you will find list of 3,000 words, list of 5,000 words, academic vocab, and so on. It's nice to have those lists because they give you exactly what you need so you can see what you have and what you are missing. However, it would be a big mistake to start memorizing those words without the context. Make sure that you know which context each word is used in. A quick example, the word run. R-U-N. If I say, I go running twice a week, I'm talking about fitness. If I say, my father runs our company, am I talking about fitness?
No.
No. I'm talking about being in charge of the company. One more example. If I say, in the long run, you will win.
Okay.
Is this fitness? No. Is this being in charge of the company? No. I'm talking about something in the long term. That's the meaning. So, the same word changes meanings. The same word can be used as different parts of speech, sometimes noun and the verb, noun and an adjective, all kinds of combinations. So do not look at the list and just blindly memorize those words. Always keep in mind the context of each one.
Time control.
Time management. So many times we hear about students saying, I wish I had more time. I didn't have enough time. I didn't finish part 1. I didn't finish part 2. We know that part 2 is worth twice the number of points than part 1. So what some students do is they start with part 1. And their logic is, well, at least I need to get my points for part 2. If I don't finish part 1, it's not as bad. However, I would recommend this technique only as a last resort. You don't want to end up in that situation. If you prepare properly the way we teach you, you should not find yourself in this situation. You should be able to start with writing 1, spend 20 minutes, do it properly, then move on to writing 2, do it within 40 minutes, and you're done. So, let's move on from here.
No time.
Mistake number 7 is not enough practice. We've all heard the expression practice makes perfect, right? Well, if you don't practice, you won't get perfect. The only way to improve is by doing the same thing again and again and getting your feedback. Let me talk about that for a little bit. If we look at a standard duration of a preparation course for IELTS, which is about 15 weeks, between 3 and 3.5 months, I would say that you need to do at least 3 mock tests. And by mock test, I mean the real exam conditions. So you study for 4 weeks, you train, and then you do 1 mock. Another 4 weeks of training, you do second mock. And in this way, you do 3 mocks. Then you will see a significant improvement every time. Now, this concerns only the mock tests, which are done under strict exam conditions. As far as your personal, individual training is concerned, I recommend to do it at least once a week by yourself to get into this rhythm. If you do it properly, by the end of 3 months, you will be in the right mode, in the right mindset to succeed on IELTS. What are the best tips I can give you as far as writing part 1? Study model answers. We give you a lot of model answers. They're available on the internet as well. Study them carefully. Compare to what you are writing. Make sure that you're studying all types of questions for the first part of writing. As you may remember, we have different types of pictures, right? We have bar charts, we have tables, graphs, line graphs, diagrams, all kinds of different pictures and different tasks. Practice all of them. If you are familiar with all of them, that's where your confidence will come. Once you're on the exam, you will not panic because you will have done so many different kinds of essays. Now, I like to give an example of a triathlon. As many of you may know, in triathlon we have 3 kinds of sport, which is, who can tell me, what is a triathlon? Swimming, right? Running is the last one.
Cycling.
Cycling, good. So we have swimming, cycling, and running. By the way, why don't we start with swimming?
Because it use the least energy.
It uses the least energy, that's one thing. Another big factor is that you don't want to finish with swimming, because if you run out of energy while swimming, it's not, as pleasant as what happens if you run out of energy while you're running. The worst thing can happen when you run, okay, you fall. Whereas when you swim, you may drown. So, to go back to our IELTS. In our triathlon, which is called IELTS, we have listening, reading, writing, without any breaks. Just like triathlon, you finish swimming, you jump on the bicycle. Finish with the cycling, throw the bicycle away, start running, non-stop. That's what I mean by triathlon. So, before you start practicing those triathlons, make sure that you've done enough training individually, separately. Those elite athletes, they don't just practice all three disciplines at the same time. They make sure that they perform really well in each one before they put them together. Same thing with IELTS. If you are not getting a band of 7 on each separate part of the test, what makes you feel or think that you will get a 7 if you put all three together? If anything, your score will go down because you will feel more stressed and more tired. Does that make sense? That's right. So, practice them separately. Once you see that the result is sufficient, then you can combine it into the real triathlon and continue your training under the real exam conditions. Okay, we're going to... Alright, as far as the first part of writing is concerned, this is what I wanted to cover. Are there any questions about what we heard so far? Crystal clear.
No.
Am I doing such a good job? Alright, so let's move on to the second part of writing, which is worth twice as much.
250.
That's the word count. I'm talking about the number of points, right? The first part gives you 1/3 of the points, whereas the second writing gives you 2/3, twice as much. Around 66% of your total mark for writing will come from part 2. When it comes to writing part 2, I want to present to you a simple 5-step plan. If you follow it, we're going to break down and make it as easy to understand as possible in terms of writing a good essay for part 2. Let's look at each step. Step 1. Understand what they want from you. What I mean by that is you need to get a very clear idea on 3 things. Number 1, general topic. What is the question about? I'll give you an example. Maybe the topic is divorce. And what is the attitude towards divorce in your country, for example? So the general topic would be divorce. Then you have a focus which is a more narrow, more specific. They are narrowing it down to your particular country. And then the third thing that you need to realize before you move on is what is it exactly that you're expected to do. So maybe the task is describe the attitude, or share your experience, or give examples. Whatever the instructions are, and usually you have more than one, that's why we say all. You need to fulfill all the requirements in order to get maximum points for the task area of the evaluation. If the task says compare the attitudes in different countries and share your opinion, and you only do one of these two, well, you will only get half of the points for task. Whatever they ask you to do, you need to do it completely to maximize your score. Step 2, brainstorm. And this is really worth spending a few minutes on talking and doing, because it is so important. You really want to spend between 5 and 10 minutes on brainstorming. This is the time for your planning. Now, some students say, well, if I spend so much time on planning, I won't have time left to write my essay. And we hear that a lot. However, surprising as it might be, the more time you spend planning, the less time it's going to take you to write the actual essay. So it's an excellent investment into the quality of your essay. Now, as you're doing your brainstorm, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a structured way. What do I mean by that? When we talk about writing essays, we have our structure: introduction, body, conclusion, right? Well, as you are brainstorming your ideas, you need to figure out right away which part of your essay that particular idea fits in. Every idea has its place. Is that part of the body? Is that an example? Is that an advantage, disadvantage, depending on the format of your essay? So practice brainstorming in the format of the essay. If you do that, when you finish your brainstorm, you will already have your mini essay, which will make it so much more clear and so much more organized. When I look at the essays written by students without brainstorm and of those who did, it's just day and night. Now, a little bit of math. So we said we had 40 minutes for the second part of writing. If we subtract 10 minutes for the brainstorm and 5 minutes for the final review, which you absolutely must do so that you can find your own mistakes, repetitions, find the appropriate synonyms, and so on, we end up having 25 minutes to write the actual essay. And that should be enough, because if we are writing a 250-word essay, which is approximately consists of 12 sentences on average. So 12 sentences in 25 minutes gives you roughly 2 minutes per sentence, which should be enough, especially after you finish your brainstorm and you already have your ideas. So if you plan things properly, you do have enough time. Now, of course, this is not math, And you will need to experiment and practice yourself to figure out what the right numbers are for you. So maybe you will be fine with 8 minutes instead of 10. Or maybe at the end your review will only take 3 minutes instead of 5. Play with these numbers and you will figure out what works for you. I'm just giving you an outline of the important things to keep in mind. Okay, once we finish our brainstorm, we start the actual essay. And introduction is where we begin. Introduction, like we said with the first writing, is the first impression that the examiner gets by looking at your essay. That's the first thing they see. And you know, you only get one chance to make the first impression, right? So make sure it's a positive one. How do you make a positive impression? By following these steps. You rephrase the topic. We already talked about that, right? You cannot just copy it, you need to rephrase it. So that's where all our synonym exercises come in handy, right? Remember when we practice, I give you a list of words, you come up with synonyms. That's what will help you do it quickly and correctly. Second thing that you need to include in your introduction is opinion statement if they ask you for your opinion. Some formats of the essays ask for your opinion, that's where you put it. If they don't ask you for your opinion, what do you do with it?
Let it go.
You keep it to yourself, exactly. Yes, and you move on to the next part of introduction, which is outline sentence. And what it basically means is simply writing what you will be discussing. That's the outline sentence. After the introduction comes the body of your essay. This is where most of the points are made or lost. So you need to pay attention to the following points. Paragraph structure. This is a very simple structure, simple and basic, that is sufficient to get the score you need. What is this structure? Now this means that you have a minimum of 2 paragraphs. Your body usually consists of at least 2 paragraphs. So each paragraph should have a topic sentence which explains, it states the topic of that paragraph. Then you have an explanation for that statement, and then you back it up with one or more examples. As a matter of fact, this structure can and should be used for speaking as well. This morning we were practicing IELTS speaking, and that's exactly the example I gave to the student. As you're practicing your speaking, so you did your brainstorm, you have some ideas, you can present your ideas in the same way. Topic sentence, explain the topic, and then provide an example. And also remember connectives. When we talk about speaking, they call them discourse markers. When you're actually talking about different parts of your speech. So you would say, before the topic sentence, you would say something like, I would like to share a personal experience with you. You're not sharing anything yet. You're just introducing what you're about to say. So that's a discourse marker. It marks for your listener or your reader what you're about to do. It's like taking the person by hand and walking them to their destination. It makes them feel very comfortable, easy to follow you, and that's one of the ways to maximize your score. So you can have an introduction in the beginning, and then before switching to another idea, you throw in another connecting. Now that I have explained to you this and this, let me talk about this, this, and this. You are connecting, that's why it's called connective. You are marking your discourse. Every sentence in your essay must have a purpose. This reminds me a little bit of the game of chess. Many of you might have seen me playing and teaching students. In chess, every move must have a purpose. Am I right? If you just move because you need to move because you're running out of time, your chances of winning the game are not very high. But if you plan and if you play properly, ideally every move must have a purpose behind it. Same thing for your essay. Every sentence has its place and purpose. After the body comes conclusion. Once you wrote your 2 paragraphs, you write one more, which is conclusion. You summarize your ideas. If you had to state your opinion, you rephrase your opinion one more time, and you're done. There is your essay part 2. Remember to do a review. What are we reviewing for? 5 minutes at the end. What are we looking for when we're doing a review? Okay, what else? Choice of words, right. Exactly, so vocabulary.